Camera crew, you guys good?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So this is the Civil Disobedience Panel. Hey. You know, I guess, do we need to introduce ourselves? We have name tags here. I suppose we can. Well, I'm thinking maybe we should talk first about how we got interested individually in civil disobedience, and maybe that would be a good introduction.
Okay.
You want to start?
Okay, my name is Jason Talley, and I'm a free agent at fr33agents.com. I first heard about what was taking place in New Hampshire when I was living in Washington, D.C. I was running an organization called Bureaucrash, and Pete was living in D.C. at the time, and we would watch videos taking place in Keene, New Hampshire. We're like, these are more of our kind of people than you know, the Beltway types, and so now we're here. Liberty Forum marks my 2-year anniversary living in the Shire, and so I'm looking forward to talking to you guys about the kind of things that we've been up to here, and I guess many of you have been participating in as well if you live here in the Shire. But it really boils down to the reason I think that nonviolent resistance is a good idea is I think good people disobey bad laws, and I try to live a moral life, and a lot of times state will make arbitrary laws that conflict with my morals, and so yeah, I have to break it. I'm trying to live a good agorist life. The agorism I consider having the consciousness of a libertarian and living that, and I'm able to do that here in the Shire. So it's good to have allies, and I appreciate you guys hearing our talk today.
I'm Ian Freeman, and I'm the host of Free Talk Live, also one of the bloggers at freekeen.com. What I saw happening, like you, Tally, I saw the videos that were being produced, and these were pretty early. We're talking about 2005, 2006, some of the earliest movers to the Keene area were Russell Canning and Kat Canning, as well as Lauren Canario. We're doing civil disobedience. I'd never seen anything like it in the liberty movement, and for me it was really just inspiring. I had kind of been working inside the system stuff down in Sarasota, Florida for a long time, and it really was pretty dull, and you know, I was getting burned out on just doing election campaign after election campaign, and doing some outreach in between, and that was just about it. When I saw people, you know, standing up to the man, I thought, wow, like, this is really impressive. I want to go and help these people, because I'd already come across the Free State Project years before that, and when I started seeing the videos coming out of Keene, I thought, these people, you know, I want to be there to video record this. I want to be there to talk about it on my radio show, and I want to promote what these people are doing, because I think it's really impressive activism that I've never seen happening anywhere else. So I moved to Keene, and I got my video camera, and I started showing up at all the different things that the Cannings and Lauren Canario were up to, and it's an infectious thing. You know, you see other people standing up, and you want to join them. So I ended up joining the ranks of the civilly disobedient, and you know, I got arrested a number of times and sat in jail, as my cohorts here have as well. So here we are.
Yeah, so thanks everyone for coming out first to Liberty Forum and just caring about these ideas enough to be here, but also this panel. I hope it's like a free-wheeling conversation, because I'm sure we all would like to learn from each other. But my name is Pete Eyre. Presently I'm most involved with copblock.org and freekeen.com, and before that Liberty on Tour and Motorhome Diaries, and like Jason, kind of came from the DC think tank world, and you know, it was a good experience. I learned a lot there. I definitely got a solid foundation, but you know, instead of being most excited about who was going to show up at a certain happy hour, or who was seen, you know, on the street or something, like I wanted to actually not just philosophize about these ideas and be a, you know, I wanted to implement them. So that's kind of why we took to the road initially, and why I landed in Keene, New Hampshire. Right now, like, there's pockets of awesome activists and communities all across the states where we travel, but just the sheer caliber and diversity of tactics being tried right now in Keene really makes that why I think it's a place where I want to allocate my time. So, but I know it is a panel of civil disobedience, and I did want to, I guess, like, make a little bit of a distinction. Like, Wiki defines civil dis as the active, professed refusal to obey certain laws, demands, and commands of a government. And you know, to me, like, I'm to the point where I think if I'm acting purposefully to to me, it seems almost like a reaction. If I'm going to engage in civil disobedience because the government or this group of individuals who call themselves the government think they have the right to tell me I can or can't do something, that almost makes my action like a reaction to them. I just want to, as has been stated, like live free and be responsible for my actions. And then if somebody comes at me and harasses me or threatens me for my actions that are peaceful, then I'll like do some damage control or engage, like bring this situation to light. But I myself feel like if I'm like known as, right, like I don't actively go out and say I'm going to be a civil disobedient person today. I just live my life, and if this group of criminals says that I'm doing something wrong, then so be it. Then I don't know if that makes sense to you guys.
Can I just end?
And I think that's an important point, because a lot of the times when people hear about the activism that takes place in Keene, especially maybe last year, it was all about people in the park that may be drinking beer, having their boo painted, or things like that. Well, that's people living free. They're going about their business, not harming people, and then willing to stand up if the police get involved and they start using aggression. I mean, I have apologized for having my boo painted in the park. I don't think it was the right decision for me. It tickled, but
Why civil disobedience?
why do I do civil disobedience?
Why is it important as a tactic?
I agree with Pete. Civil disobedience, I mean, I appreciate the book by Thoreau, but it's not something that I strive to do. I strive to live free. And, the state makes these arbitrary rules, and sometimes, those laws everybody in this room breaks rules. There's a book, everybody does 3 felonies a day. I mean, everybody does civil disobedience. It just happens. It's just, I guess, how you react to it. And so, like a lot of the activists that I associate with in Keene, they will take video of these things and they will broadcast it. And I would encourage everybody to do that. If you're going to make a stand, make a big stand, and social media is free. It's easy to do, and encourage more people to do that. We're now live streaming the civil disobedience when it takes place, so people can get out the word, and that also helps create like a safety net. But why civil disobedience? There's a lot of reasons, but it's funny because like civil disobedience is also inside the system activism. If you decide to go to the court dates, and that's a big drag. I hate that stuff.
It's definitely one of the negative sides of it. But I have to say I disagree to some extent with what you said there. I feel like civil disobedience is something that is planned, that it is something that you promote, and that you intend to go out and do this, like Gandhi burning his papers or whatever. You made an event out of disobeying. I think that when something comes along, when you're living free and the aggressors come along, they attempt to hurt you or your friends, and you stand up, I feel like that is disobedience, but it's also more non-cooperation. Non-cooperation is just kind of a common tactic that we all engage in at all times. It's one of the things that happens a lot in the Keene area. But civil disobedience is like, the 420 celebrations, when something's going to happen at a specific time and people know they can be there to do something. Or, by the way, Lauren Canario has just walked in the room shortly after I was talking about her. That's her there if you have any questions for her. But like with Lauren and Kat going into the IRS office and intending to hold signs there. Not too radical of an event, but radical enough to get them arrested by the federal government in that case. Something that's promoted in advance. I feel like there's a subtle distinction that should be made there. And I don't think there's anything wrong with those let's announce in advance we're going to break a law tactic, because it changes how the whole thing plays out. Whereas if you're just non-cooperating on the spot, they're not ready to handle you in the same way. They can kind of arm up a little bit more when you promote it in advance. And it changes how things play.
Yeah, there's a lot, I guess, with both of y'all that I agree with. And it's partly, too, it's like strategy itself has changed as I've engaged in more activism and stuff myself and my own development. But like, I guess distinguish, like what Ian said, non-cooperation versus civil disobedience. If civil disobedience, if the same action could be considered non-cooperation if done to somebody that is not employed by the government, that doesn't subsist on stolen funds, or if you're doing it to prove a point, again, to me it seems like more reactionary. Like, I don't want to engage, like, the purpose of civil disobedience is to get a certain injustice in front of more eyes and then in front of more minds to hopefully bring about a change. And to me, if you're engaging. If you choose to allocate, it comes down to opportunity cost. If you choose to allocate your time to civil disobedience, that means you're choosing to try to like think about how this other group of people that you believe doesn't have legitimacy is going to react to you, to it then inspire other people. So to me, instead of allocating your scarce resources there, why not create and build and create this community and let that speak for itself? And then instead of talking to people about theory and how things might work, let's create it and make it work. And then if these people that think they have the right to control and regulate and dictate our lives come after us, then that thriving community is there to support each other. You know, that's what I would advocate today.
Right. I would advocate more civil resistance than civil disobedience. And civil resistance includes building these alternative markets and these alternative societies. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Gene Sharp. There's going to be a documentary released about him soon. And a lot of the Occupy movement has borrowed his ideas, as well as movements around the world in the Middle East. They study his work. He has the Albert Einstein Institute. And so he came up with 198 methods of nonviolent action. And so I was reading through it the other day, and I'm like, wow, we do that, and there's just so much that takes place in the Shire. But the Free State Project is a declaration or to intend and make a statement that way of pilgrimages. That's core to what we do. Alternative markets. Agorism is really thriving in Keene, in Manchester, I know, and that's important to a lot of us who don't want to. In New Hampshire, you have to pay the state if you want to get together. It's one of my pet peeves when like Liberty people get together at a restaurant, but they're paying the state for the privilege. So in Keene, we pretty much try to take care of a lot of that ourselves, and we cook for one another, and so people can make money that way, and not have to pay the state for the privilege of getting together. But there's a whole bunch of things. One of my favorite things, I don't know if you guys wanted to talk about, was disclosing identities of secret agents.
It's been one of my favorite activities. It was during Bob Constantine's trial from Grafton when he was facing charges for growing cannabis at his home, where since he took this to trial, which is non-cooperation, when you get charged with something and they come after you with felonies or misdemeanors or whatever, they always offer you the plea deal. And one of the things that we do real consistently in Keene is don't take the plea deal outreach, where almost every day of the week we're at court handing out information about not taking the plea deal. And when you don't take the plea deal, certain things happen. You'll get the opportunity to get a better plea deal. So you know, even if you do take the plea deal down the line, you probably get a better one if you wait it out. But also you can go to trial and then actually put the issue in front of a jury. You get the discovery, you get to find out exactly how good or weak the state's case actually is against you. And in the case of Bob Constantine, they had to, because he went to trial, they had to bring undercover agents out to testify.
Can I just jump in for a moment? During the negotiations because I was with Bob every step of the way taking video of his trial, and so there were some negotiations about, do I turn my camera off, or do I point it towards the wall, or do the undercover agents wear a ski mask? And so I was like, yeah, they can wear a ski mask in front of the jury. That'd be a great visual for these guys.
So we came out that day.
But they did. They were brought into the courtroom with a ski mask on. One gentleman was, and another one was covering his head with his jacket. And they checked us going into the court building and into the courtroom for electronics, and just anyway, double standard.
Well, what ended up happening was they wouldn't let us in the courtroom with electronic devices, but that didn't stop us from standing outside the courtroom doors with video cameras and outside the courthouse. And I think the videos, and two-way radios to help coordinate. I think the video is called Grafton Circus, or Grafton County Court Circus. It's on YouTube, where you can see us, Ademo and Pete and I, basically chasing these cops down and trying to get their faces on film. And it's just incredible how desperate they are to hide themselves. So that's a lot of fun when that happens.
So one of the guys who was on the stand testifying, an undercover, who for whatever reason thought some other strangers with guns should cage our friend Bob for growing a plant on his property and not hurting anybody. I mean, that's to frame it. So anyway, one of the guys who was there testifying, he looked like a guy we might hang out with, a pretty chill dude, tatted up, gauges and stuff. And
Charles I. Newton.
Yeah, Charles Newton. So then a month or so later, we're in Newport, New Hampshire to support Ian's co-host of Free Talk Live, Mark Edge, who had a speeding ticket And so we went out there, and afterwards, as we usually do, we went out to grab a bite. You know, these kind of events, rather than chilling dissent and things, actually bring the community together. At Bob's trial, there were people there from all over New Hampshire, Vermont, and elsewhere. You know, it's really good to see. But anyway, so we went out to eat after Mark Edge's speeding ticket, and in the parking lot we see two cars pulled up driver's side to driver's side, and you know, comes to light, we realize it's Charles Newton. We all run over, there are cameras, and he peels out, and then you know, we put that content online, and he's sort of outed as an undercover. So, you know,
and I believe Charles like handed over money and then had to speed off without getting drugs, and so the guy like makes $20.
Yep.
And didn't get arrested. Because he would have got the sheriff was waiting down the road to make an arrest.
Yep.
So you know, to some extent, that's disobedience or non-cooperation. In that, you know, most people wouldn't be willing to do that. They could be afraid of you know, some sort of obstructing charge or whatever.
Right.
And we just did what we thought was right in that instant. I mean, we didn't have time to think about it or talk about it. It was we were walking up to that restaurant, recognized the cop, and immediately you know, took action.
But Civ Dis seems a little bit to me more like planned. It's, you know what I mean? Like, hey, on this date I'm going to do this for these reasons, and that was just like a reaction, which is like a lot of the things. Like, I don't want to, again, like try to anticipate the movements of some strangers that have no. Like, I don't care what these people in Concord or DC are saying or doing, you know, it's the people that with the guns who think they have the right to enforce it. Those are the people harassing me, and so, like, react to those situations instead of proactively, or like, going out there and allocating your time to legitimizing the system.
But either way, the intentions are similar in that you or the way you're approaching it is similar, because you have to have the willingness to say no. Sure. Whether it's civil disobedience or it's non-cooperation, whether it's planned or whether it's in the moment, the ultimate, you know, it's the ultimate test of your resolve, I guess you could say. The willingness to know that if you don't do what they tell you, there's a cage waiting for you, and that's something you have to accept in advance. You know, if you're going to go and do some civil disobedience, or if you're going to plan to be non-cooperative in the instance that, you know, you're doing some sort of agorist thing, you end up getting caught. Then you know, you've got to be aware that there is that possibility that you could go into a cage, and it could be a long time. You know, they could decide to try to teach you a lesson or make an example out of you, which is where I think one of the most important factors that in my 5 or so years of following civil disobedience here in New Hampshire and being involved in it as well, I think one of the most important factors is numbers. The more you can have on your side of civil disobedience and non-cooperation, the better, the safer it's going to be. There have been so many times when I think back to the Trespass of 12 event at the local jail in Keene a couple years ago. It was 2010, early 2010. Russell Canning was being held in a jail cell, and we wanted to go and see him. And you know, it was a long time tradition that we would go to the local jail and walk around the jail and hold signs and wave and smile at the prisoners, and brighten their day a little bit. But then when they moved to this new jail, they built a $40 million jail, brand new facility. This was our first time going to the new facility. So we figured we're going to do the same thing we normally do, walk around the jail, wave and smile, and that's what we did. There were about 50 people there in the beginning. Well, word came over the police scanner that the cops were coming, and 35 plus people scattered. They took off, leaving about a dozen of us. We walked around the jail again, like, you know, we're not doing anything wrong. There's no fences, there's nothing to keep us out. And when the cops showed up, they just immediately arrested us without any kind of warning. Some of the people that were there weren't even intending, you know, it wasn't their intention to get arrested that day. It certainly wasn't my intention to get arrested. Sometimes when you're doing what you feel is right, you just get arrested. So just even putting yourself out there into a situation where you could possibly encounter the police is always, you know, could result in something like that happening to you. But my question was, well, what would have happened if the 35 people who scattered stayed? How would that have changed things? Because what they ended up having to do was bring out 13 cops. They called in police from different areas. They didn't have enough Keene police. They had to bring in the Marlboro and Swansea cops. They had to bring some COs out from the jail. They brought in a statey. So they had 13 men to arrest 12 of us. So what if there were still 50 of us?
They'd get a Bearcat.
The Bearcat can only, you know, bring more guys in. Ultimately, we've seen situations where having numbers completely neutralized And I think a perfect example is the 420 celebrations in Keene, where we had over 100 people in the park, and they did try to make an arrest. And what happened was 50 people walked to the police station, sat in a big circle behind the police station, and proceeded to smoke cannabis right outside the police station. The next day, the police made another arrest in the park, and another 50 people went to the police station, this time going inside the lobby of the police station and proceeding to smoke cannabis inside the lobby of the police station. The cops didn't do a thing about it because they had a lobby full of people. They couldn't possibly do anything about it. And then after that, the police didn't show up again in Central Square for another year and a half until a completely unrelated murder happened and totally changed how Central Square was being utilized by the local population. But I mean, would you guys agree that when you cross a certain threshold of if it's more of you than there are of them, it totally changes how everything plays out?
Changes everything, not just civil disobedience, but I mean, like how we live our lives. I mean, how we can conduct agorism, the support networks that are built. So, yeah, if you're not living in the Shire yet, I encourage you to do so. It makes everybody safer, and I think you'll have a good time here.
Yeah. I guess I would caution like the distinctions between us and them. I mean, I think a lot of the folks we're talking about, I mean, everyone's an individual, and some of them haven't ever been exposed to these ideas before. So I think first and foremost, if you can, try to have a conversation with them and introduce these ideas and see if they're at least receptive, you know.
Who's them?
I mean, the them that was mentioned was the police or people with badges. But I'm just saying, I mean, there's people with badges who quit their jobs, there's people with badges who, after a conversation with one of you guys, you may plant a seed, and that may be the difference between one day them sitting by and watching their colleague beat somebody up, or stepping in between that, or, you know, making public their support for, you know, against the Bearcat in Keene or something like that. I mean, the more we put up a wall, the less likely they are to ever be receptive to these ideas.
Connecting, I agree with that. Connecting with the aggressors as humans is so important, and that's why I think it's important if you're going to do civil disobedience or non-cooperation, to come from a place of peace, to come from a place of empathy for these guys. I mean, they aren't necessarily familiar with these ideas. And being angry at them isn't going to help them open their mind. Being frustrated with them is not going to help them open their minds. It's not easy to handle what they're doing to you and your friends, but trying to keep as calm as possible and not go into the mode of anger, I think, can help make those connections. Sometimes there's hugging opportunities for the police in Keene. Most of them turn it down, but recently I did have the chance to hug one of the cops that actually arrested the Hika that day that I was standing in front of the police car as they were arresting Hika. So he testified against me at my trial, saying during the trial that when I asked him how he defined liberty, he basically said he never thinks about it. And then later, when I confronted him again about saying that, when we were getting kicked out of the Huntsman event at the school, I said, what did I say to him in that case? It was something like, so. Anyway,
we sang at him.
Yeah, well, I brought up the issue of him, what he said in court about not thinking about liberty at all. And he says, "Well, I have liberty," and it's a very revealing statement. It's true. He does. He's the man with the gun, and he can do whatever it is he wants to. And then it was after that he showed up at karaoke. We do karaoke on Saturday nights in Keene, and he showed up just in civilian clothes. I think his sister works the bar at the karaoke place. And of course I'm in there, as I am every Saturday night. He walks up and I kind of waved at him as he came in, because I'm not mad at the guy, peaceful. And he walks up and offers his hand to shake. I shake his hand, and then it was just a few weeks later that Kelly Voluntaries and I were at a school board meeting, and he was outside standing guard. They'd actually called him in because they'd heard some Free Staters were going to show up at the school board meeting. And he said he was talking about how bored he was at this meeting, like he wished he didn't have to be there, even though he was getting paid time and a half to.
Because you guys were there?
Yeah, just because we were there. He got called in to be security for the event, otherwise he wouldn't have been there. And it was at that time we offered him a hug, and both Kelly and I got hugs from him. So, maybe the next time an arrest is happening, he's going to be a little bit nicer about it. So I think that's important.
Well, you brought up not approaching it from an angry direction. And I think that's a really good point. So 2 years ago, I was at Liberty Forum, and I don't know if you saw the video, or maybe some of you were there, but there was a 420 celebration. They decided to arrest out of all of us, Liberty people. There was this one young black local boy, and so the crowd was just outraged. I was outraged, and that was really my first bit of activism. I had a camera, so I'm like pointing at these guys with their dogs, and all their vehicles that show up. And so, like, we're shouting things at them. And then Richard Onley shows up at the police station later, and he has song sheets, and then people start singing. And I thought, wow, that is such a much better approach, because it shows us as the peaceful people that we are. And so all of us up here, and maybe some of you that are like in Keene or wherever, we do the Shire Choir, and so we try to sing about, express ourselves through that, try to be entertaining. We showed up at the police department recently for the Bearcat. I think most of you probably have one of these with the song lyrics on it. We showed up at city councilors' homes. I know you guys sang in front of the last city council meeting.
That's right. Yeah.
And I just think it's a great tactic, and like I said, it shows us off as the peaceful people that we are. And Richard Onley, he will get us a song within 24 hours if we give him the subject matter. He's just very prolific. So.
Yeah, I mean, how can it's hard for people to be angry at folks who are singing, and it's a tried and true tactic, being used in the freedom movement in the '60s. And it's funny though, even though we're singing, and who could argue with singing, there are still people that say that it's passive aggressive to be singing.
Yeah, and so a lot of us we received trespassing orders from the county courthouse, so we can't show up because we were singing there one day.
That's right. Yeah. So I think I don't. If you guys want to add some stuff, I definitely want to make sure we open it up to
let's open it up
from the audience. Anybody? Allie?
I was going to ask about so basically when you're doing civil disobedience, then it's a performance, but the audience is kind of ambiguous sometimes. So I wonder about it's depending on how big the story goes. The audience could be just locals. A lot of times people who are thinking about moving or keeping up with the activism going on are watching, so they're also an audience. And then like this Bearcat thing got really big and made national news, so then we have a national audience now looking at this.
International.
Right, and so when you're doing activism, what like individually are you guys, like what audience are you acting for or performing for?
I don't know, I think whenever you take an action in life, whether it's like activism or anything, you should do some planning and like figure out you want to have the biggest impact for the lowest.
Well, like if locals don't like it, but people watching videos at home who are thinking about moving really like it, is it, do you sometimes have to? I
don't know, I would say it comes down to the individual, and it's a decision for everybody. I mean, I try to I know, I don't feel like I don't think someone with a badge has any extra rights than anybody here. And if I was out on the street, filming something, I wouldn't say, oh, by the way, I'm filming as you walk by. But, if I was engaging with a cop, I'd proactively tell him, because I know that takes away something that for lack of a better term, what I call a cop sucker. Like someone who just, who bends over backwards in support of the thin blue line and that. But yeah, so I think it's good to be proactive and strategize and think who's the potential audience, and then figure out how you can have the biggest impact with the least amount of risk, and while staying true to your principles.
When I stood in front of the police car as they were arresting my friend Heike for enjoying a beverage in the park on a Sunday afternoon, I had made that decision in advance. Talley referred to the 420 that happened at the last Liberty Forum in 2010. And all the arrests that happened there. And David Cruz, who I don't see in this room but is here this weekend, David Cruz was there, and he sat in front of the police car in that instance. And that's where I got my inspiration for that. I told myself, wow, I think that's really great activism and really powerful, and I want to emulate that. So I told myself that the next time I see the police arresting a peaceful person, that was how I was going to respond. So I didn't know when that was going to be, but I knew it would happen at some point. It's inevitable. I'm going to be around when the police are aggressing against somebody. And so I just went and I stood in front of that police car, and I had some great folks join me, Rich Paul, Wes, and Meg. And in that case, there was no decision about who am I targeting, who's going to be the audience. There was no thought whatsoever. For me, that was just, well, this is the right thing to do, and I want to make this stand, and whatever. I don't even know what it's going to end up being. It ended up being my friend who had a beverage in the park, but it could have been something else. It could have been a year later. It could have been sooner. That was just doing the right thing, or at least what felt right to me.
I see what you're saying about it being a performance, although I don't like to think of it like that. However, I do think about when there's cameras around or I'm behind my camera that people are going to watch this video, and I would like to be seen as the good guy in this video, and I would like for the person who I'm talking to, if they're being antagonistic or aggressive, I'd like for them to be seen as the bad guy, although with their badge and their authority, a lot of people don't see it that way. But so I do keep that in mind, how I would appear. But I would hope that would work locally, because we live here. These are our neighbors. We definitely, I mean, I really want to make allies here, but also globally, because we want people to move as well.
Yeah, and I just want to add one thing, just to echo what Talley said. I mean, I think focusing on the community aspect is definitely more of a priority, because, you know, there's been like a couple forms of activism that generally, if you're in Keene or elsewhere, and people that aren't like in this liberty sort of oriented mindset are aware of, that are negatives to them, you know, that's what's in their mind. So I think it is, again, to think about strategy and impact and lessening, you know, stuff. If you're going to engage in something, you know, whether you put 10 hours into it or, you know, 10 days in a cage, like what sort of impact is it going to have? And is it going to be something that's detrimental to the what you're trying to do in the eyes of others in the community? You know, I mean, there's plenty of things you could do that you could advance the liberty message through. So I would, you know, encourage you to think about what those are, rather than maybe some of the more off the cuff, without thinking activism that maybe has burned reputations for other, like, in the past. And again, then it makes it important to distinguish that you know, you're acting as an individual, or someone else's activism was their individual act, and it doesn't speak for you, and vice versa. So you might not support everything that's going on. Just
Yeah, I think it's important to think things out and plan, but in some cases you don't have that opportunity. You have to act, right? Like if somebody's being aggressive against you, you want to take an action, then
I guess I'm speaking about, like, yeah, there's certain activism that's happening in Keene that I think we can think of that has generated more negative press than positive press.
Give one example.
Like open carrying while topless. Yeah.
The topless one, I mean, that's one that's still.
Are we talking about Cassidy walking down the street topless? Because there was Topless Tuesdays and there was Cassidy. And
I'm not saying it, I mean, obviously no one was hurt there and the property was damaged, but.
And actually Cassidy ended up getting released and
Right.
got an apology from the police, because what she did wasn't illegal to walk down the street topless as a woman in New Hampshire.
Right, but as a result of that, you and I and a bunch of other people who have chosen to move to Keene have had to overcome that hurdle and other similar hurdles.
So
I'm not saying I never make mistakes, but I'm just saying we should think about.
Was it a mistake?
Well, I would say, I mean, me walking around Keene, if there's this many people and this many who've never heard of Free Keene or the FSP, and of those that have, like, it's a negative. I mean, the Bearcat thing's been great. I mean, there's a lot of overlap and for good reason, but yeah, I mean, the people that have a negative reaction towards Keene often cite this issue, and so
I don't. I get where you're coming from, and I feel like anytime you do something that challenges the status quo, there's going to be a negative reaction.
Right.
And obviously, some things are going to be more popular than others, no doubt about that. But I think with Cassidy's topless event, most people were reacting to the toplessness, not so much the open carry, and that, even though it was both at once. In that case, I think there were a lot of there was some positive coverage on, like, some women's rights blogs, as I recall.
Well, maybe, I mean, maybe that should have been, maybe if Cassidy was intended to do this action, maybe like a more thorough strategy brainstorming could have happened to figure out how it could be leveraged, how those organizations could help us, could help her put a spotlight on the activism and really shape the message, instead of letting the Keene Sentinel or whoever else, like, who has the local newspaper, have like a pro-government bias. You know.
Well, I think that's true, and I think that what we're developing in Keene is more media. I was talking about David Cruz. There he is right now, actually, sitting now. But we've got more media now in Keene than ever before, and so we've got Free Keene TV, which allows for a full narrative to be told. When I was in jail, one of the critiques that I got, because I got a lot of feedback from some of the staff in jail, and one of the critiques I got from one of the cooks, the jail cook, was on the Trespass of 12 issue. He had seen the raw video of the arrests, and that's all. Like, he saw that video on Free Keene blog, but he didn't see any of the story surrounding it, didn't know anything. So when I told him the full story about that, he was completely on our side. But when all he saw was just a bunch of people getting arrested out front of the jail, he was, all for their arrest, and he thought that the cops did the right thing because he didn't know the whole narrative. And so now that we have better ways to cover these events with our own media, maybe that can help that. And the planning, I think, obviously, you can do better with more planning. I think that's all true. But I think to shy away from an event like a topless walk down Main Street simply because some people will be offended by it, I think is the wrong approach. Because inevitably someone's going to be offended by any sort of activism that's done. And I'll cite the success that the politicos have been having in the State House. And I support politics too. I'm running for school board, actually. So I'll do whatever it takes to achieve as much liberty as possible. But when you look at the Free Staters that have won in Concord, and they put these bills forth, and they cut the budget by 12 or 11%, and there's these things that have been happening. Some of the people in Concord, the people that are in charge of the status quo, they are livid about this. They are ready. They just had some conference, I think it was last night, about what to do about the Free Staters.
This is the Democratic Party in New Hampshire, right?
Yeah. Right. What to do about the Free Staters? They're ruining everything, and they are not happy. You're not going to make people happy when you challenge the status quo.
The status quo.
And the status quo also includes the oppression of and the inequality of women. And so I think that when it comes to people being topless, I think that's a pretty important issue that people, there should be equality on that issue. So I won't back away from issues just because some people happen to be prudish.
Yep, that's what you can find at freekeen.com. So we've been talking about this for a while, but let's open up more questions.
Yeah,
if anybody has anything. No other questions?
Oh yeah, just a quick point. I was watching the story about the Bearcat, and it's covered in the Union Leader, and it's on Channel 9 and everything like that. Or the Free Staters and Free Keeners and whatnot are in the press now. But Seabrook Police Department has taken on 3 new pieces of military hardware. I think one of them is an armored personnel carrier. One of them is a Humvee. I forget what the other one is, but they've been taking on quite a bit of quote-unquote free military hardware. And because I sit on the town's budget committee, we've brought up the question of, well, the last free rescue boat that we took has never been put to actual use, and we spent over $80,000 maintaining the thing. So every time we take on free military hardware, Coast Guard hardware, there's a cost associated with that, and that stuff is really expensive to maintain, and it's not designed like a Honda Civic. It's designed to be, they're in the parts business like anybody else.
Yeah, and you can approach it from a fiscal perspective, and that'll appeal to the conservatives, and you approach it from a peace perspective, that'll appeal to the Democrats. Questions about civil disobedience? I think there was one back there.
Yes, and you guys have already covered this a little bit, but maybe a little more directly. I come from sort of an old school libertarian background, and so when I first heard Free Talk Live and some of the other shows, I was, at first I was really shocked, and then I became inspired by the guts that you guys show. And then it started to bother me a little bit. I've got some concern about the efficacy of your strategy of doing the non-cooperation and civil disobedience, because of the danger of alienating the community. That people go, oh, there's those people, troublemakers, and they don't tend to look beyond, well, why are they doing it? They're just a bunch of people that are obstructing our normal lives. And I'm wondering about that versus, well, if you don't like the law, change it. And it would seem like isn't that the ultimate goal, is to make these things legal so there isn't, you don't have to go out and stand in the parking lot and assert your rights in order to get your point across or change your freedom.
Okay, so the most recent example of civil disobedience that I was involved with was not standing for a judge fast enough. So how am I going to change that law? I mean, in New Hampshire, like, judges can make up whatever the rule they want. They have the power to administrate over their building. So, and then when I was getting picked up from that time when I was arrested, there was a woman in the car who's not a liberty activist, just a local, and her question was, why didn't I stand up for the judge? So yeah, there's going to be people that disagree. I don't know how to win somebody like that over. Go ahead.
On Free Talk Live last night, I believe there was a constitutional expert that was outlining how you would do this to have these.
Redress or grievance committee, but he also said that if there's another Speaker of the House, that committee's out, and that committee hasn't done anything so far productive.
There's
It's a
simply a way to
slow
remove
process.
corrupt judges.
It hasn't been done. I mean, they say that.
They're working on it, you know, and these things take time. You know, I think what you're touching on is a common critique of civil disobedience, and the question I was asked a lot when I was in jail was it worth it? I wrote a long blog post about this, and I know our friend Wes is sitting in jail right now, and if you'd like to write to him, mailtojail.com is where you can go and easily send him a message. You know, I'm sure he would really appreciate hearing from you, even if you don't know him. He's in jail basically for talking to the police, essentially 6 months for contempt of court, actually. The chalking would have gotten him a much lighter sentence, but because he missed a court date, he's put in jail for 6 months, and it's just terrible what they're doing to him. And I know that he's questioning. He wrote me a letter, and you know he's questioning doing civil disobedience, and I totally understand being in a position like that why you would question it. And it's certainly not right for everybody, but on the other hand, I think it's still a very important thing to do because it does draw attention to issues, and if you're willing to take those risks, then you can have the reward of an unusual amount of press coverage, perhaps, for something. But also, to me, you know, I sat in jail for 58 days, and I could have been doing a lot of other things with that time. I could have been working on my radio show and reaching more people through those venues. But then I wouldn't have necessarily reached the right people. You know, maybe I wouldn't have reached you know, the people that saw that happen and said, wow, that's really inspiring. I want to get involved in that. I want to join these people. Whether or not they want to do civil disobedience is another question. Maybe they just want to join like I originally did, to come and hold a video camera, or to come and to do some other ancillary support role, take care of the cat while somebody's in jail. So, was it worth it? Well, yeah, because I chose it and I knew what possible consequences could be. And once you start to stand up, this is one of the negatives, by the way, of doing civil disobedience and non-cooperation. Once you get in the habit of standing up for yourself and saying no to these so-called authorities, it gets really difficult to stop doing that. Like, once they put you on a suspended sentence, like I'm on right now, or they're holding bail conditions over your head, or they got some kind of an act, some kind of legal act that's hanging over you at all times, it gets more difficult to say, oh, okay, I'll leave the area, or I'll turn the camera off, or whatever. I still find myself, even though I'm on a suspended sentence, the other day, Nemi and I got pulled over, and the cop says, turn that off, you're going to be arrested. I moved in closer with the camera at that point and continued recording. And he backed down. But I could have been arrested, could have violated the suspended sentence, could have gone back to jail. So one of the worst parts about standing up for yourself is you never want to stop standing up for yourself, because it becomes a habit. And if more people have that habit, then what would they be able to do?
Yeah.
Actually, maybe we'll come back to you, but
Pete, yeah, I just weigh in on that. I mean, just to go off on what Ian said, if we each, I mean, if the goal is to quit being harassed by people who think they have the right to dictate your life, then why try to work within a system that they create and that they legislate and interpret and judge? They're never going to agree to their own abolition to stop taking your money and telling you how you can and can't act. So, I mean, I think the surest way to do it is just to limit and to inspire others around you, because to me, if you take care of the means, you have to take care of themselves. So let's just live free.
There's a gentleman back, one row behind you there, go ahead.
My question to you was, Ian, was in talking about civil disobedience, I understand civil disobedience, but I like the sticker on Pete's MacBook right there, stay free, govern yourself. How important is governing yourself when it comes to civil disobedience and discerning what is important, what areas are important to practice civil disobedience? The difference would be filming police, like you mentioned. I think there's a big difference between something like that and the lady you mentioned walking in the Burger King topless, where I think that, like Pete said, can create tension between you and the rest of the public.
Well, it depends.
Would I be right if I took off my pants and exposed myself?
Okay, so it depends what you're asking. And what you're touching on is the social ostracism kind of aspect of how do you choose an issue. And it's important, right? Like, so I wouldn't go out to support someone having sex in public. I think that's probably going too far. But I think a woman walking down the street, it wasn't Burger King, she was walking down Main Street, walking down the street topless, which men are regularly able to do without anybody batting an eye at it. I consider that to be a real issue. Right. I think a lot of people do. So if you throw something out there to your friends in the liberty movement, you say, hey guys, I'm thinking about doing this, and the response is, well, I don't support you, and you're not getting much support, maybe you shouldn't do it. But if the response is, wow, that's a great idea, let's do that, I'll come, I'll record it, and I'll get behind you, and I'll help you out if you get arrested or whatever, then if you have the support, then it's a good issue. I think if you spend too long trying to balance what the community's going to think, that I think you're cutting your nose off to spite your face and possibly missing opportunities to really hit new audiences.
I'll disagree a little bit. I mean, I would rather focus my time on stuff like this, where the community's behind it and we're making allies, whereas that might be more divisive. So I only have a finite amount of time I can spend on activism, or editing video, or posting things on a website. So I'll focus on things where I think you can build bridges.
Yeah, you asked about self-government, government, and its importance. I mean, I'd say it's instrumental because we each have our own, morality is not objective. We each have our own what we think is right and wrong, and we all have our own lines. We all know what we might be willing to say no to, or stand up for our beliefs in different circumstances. Whether it's against somebody who has a badge who's trying to shake you down and take your money, or whether it's against someone, it's just some random folks on the street who are trying to take your money. I mean, at the end of the day, you own yourself and you're responsible for your actions. So that should be your guiding light for everything in life, including activism. And I guess back to this issue because it keeps being brought up. I mean, I just want to be clear. I'm not saying what she did was necessarily bad because there was no victim. What I'm saying is maybe it could have been thought through a little bit better and handled better. Maybe reach out to people in the community ahead of time. Say, hey, this is going to happen. You're with the women's rights group on this campus. You're with this battered women's shelter. You're with everyone has a civil liberty group, whatever, and just try to get the support there, and just not allow it to be used as a negative thing, because being free and acting free should never be a negative thing. It should inspire other people. I mean, we all have the same rights no matter where we're born. So, this definition of civil disobedience about being opposed to some government dictates. I don't want to live my life in reaction to some arbitrary rules somebody else makes. I just want to live free and do what makes sense to me, and I hope other people will do the same and support each other if you see somebody else getting harmed. That's what it comes down to.
I'd like to add one thing. Sometimes you can't predict what the reaction is going to be. So, for instance, we know people were upset about, some people were upset about the topless thing, but on the other hand, Kelly Voluntarist went to the Manchester airport a couple of weeks ago wearing nothing but red lingerie, and I thought that was going to have a much colder response than it actually did. I thought people were going to be turned off. I thought a lot of people would be turned off by that, and I'm sure there were some people in the airport that didn't appreciate it. But what I saw was an overwhelmingly positive response. People were smiling. They thought it was funny. They appreciated that she was there, and it was an overwhelmingly positive response. So sometimes, past experience isn't necessarily an indicator of what's going to happen in the future.
But it's more relevant and more planned out, like Pete is saying. Yeah. But we have limited amount of time, so I'd love to take more questions if you guys don't mind.
John, I think.
Yes, I've been in this movement for a few decades, and one of the things I saw with the civil disobedience folks was they probed the system. So much so that in Grafton we hold the record for amount of Supreme Court cases per capita, more than any other town in New Hampshire. And because we are concentrated with activists, but we tend to clog the court. And so seeing what they were doing in Keene to the court system has made us double our efforts to make sure the whole corrupt system comes down. Because it's not right to harass somebody that's minding their own business for laws that make no sense whatsoever. And because of the way you people probe the system, we now have codified their weaknesses. Things that I learned when I was on the Governor's Efficiency Commission, I suspected. But when I saw what activists, like especially Sam, where they threw him out of jail, to me that's an indication they're in trouble. They don't have the moral majority, the moral standing to imprison people that aren't harming no one. And because of your probing the system, we know you can drive them crazy. I've heard in the grapevine that even the Keene police don't want to deal with you folks anymore because they
Oh,
don't
you should
want
see
you
what
laughed
happens when
at.
they show up at the KAC. If they've got something, the Keene Activity Center, they had a note that they wanted to deliver recently to one of the activists there. They came over to my side of the house with the studio because they knew my side's not full of activists. And it seems like every time they come by, they want to get out of there as quickly as possible. There's a lady in the back, I think, with a question.
And this might have to be the last question because we're running out of time.
Yeah, well, whatever, yeah, sure. Well, go ahead.
I'm Jackie. Just a quick note on the civil disobedience. I just came from the Veterans March in Washington, D.C., and there were a lot of veterans and active duty acting in civil disobedience despite threats, because when we do these kinds of things, we get thrown in a military prison, and so there are big consequences, and we get threatened. Although we had an outstanding turnout, there was a lot of talk about getting caught with out of uniform, so to speak, and getting Article 15 for that. And there were a lot of great people. There were probably more active duty troops marching in civilian outfits, costume, because of the threats. But one thing that we discussed thoroughly among the ranks was about plants and people going to rat us out and who are the agents provocateur among us and that kind of thing, because you got to watch out because that's sometimes how they catch you. And one way to tell and to vet people as movements grow, you do gain insiders and enemies and that kind of thing. And one advantage of being a civil disobedient is that those around you know that there's a good chance that you're for real. If you're running for office and you have a record of civil disobedience behind you, I mean, not all of us have a perfect voting record like Dr. Congressman Paul, but those of us who have a record of civil disobedience, then when you determine who can we really trust and we can put the right people in charge with power and who gets into, know what's going on, that kind of thing, it does come out as an advantage that if you have a past of civil disobedience, those who are really on the front lines of freedom know who all of us are. We all reputation based. We all know each other. But of course, there are always infiltrators and people trying to throw things off. And we figured there might even be someone trying to incite some kind of violence to make our peaceful movement look bad and that kind of thing. But we got along just fine, and we're doing quite well at this point. But
okay, thank you.
I think what you touched on about the instigators of violence is important. There's always the possibility that you've been infiltrated. In fact, I tend to act as though we're always infiltrated, that somebody in any given group is working for the government. Maybe it's because they're under pressure, they're being forced, they're being threatened with some sort of charges and they feel like that's the only way they can get out of it. I don't know what their story is. But we've had people come through the Keene area over the years who have kind of intimated at getting violent, and that just doesn't fly. Somebody just posted on the Shire Society forum just a few days ago some kind of violent response to the Bearcat, etc. And immediately the responses from the forum were, "Whoa, that's maybe you're in the wrong place because that doesn't go here." And so I would say that if somebody comes into your group and starts talking about violence or suggesting violence, that you approach them with as much compassion as you can, because maybe they're just misguided. I know I've thought those things in the past and I've changed my mind. Approach them with compassion, suggest that they've changed their mind about that. But if they persist, disconnect and don't allow them to associate with you. Right. So
again, even if there is worst case scenario, maybe there's people here, whatever. Like, we're not doing anything wrong, we're not hurting anybody. So maybe them being here, being surrounded by these ideas will be good for them. I mean, you think about the Waco situation. There was a Fed embedded there, and they knew the whole time. And when they got word that the Feds were coming in, he said, "Hey, we know they're coming." Or David communicated to the guy, "Hey, we know they're coming. If you want to stay or go." And the guy, he left, but he was like, afterwards, he spoke out against what had happened, and he was able to see firsthand that they weren't this cult, that they were a community and this and that. But the one thing I did want to say quick to follow up on John's point, and you probably know this, but I think it's important to distinguish between law, which you said, or legal and like legislation, because like what's legal, I would say, is like universal law, how we all know to treat each other, common law, God's law, whatever, versus legislation, which is arbitrary and man-made, and that's what's in strangers make, and it doesn't have any sway over any of us unless we choose to give it any legitimacy.
I think we could probably extend just a few more minutes, just looking at the schedule here for more questions.
Okay.
Right there.
You talk about Keene mostly? I mean, I understand it's, you know, that you have your reputation for civil disobedience, you have the radio station and so on. I just wonder, and Grafton now, I just wonder, is there anything that is state, you know, do you have a statewide issue that might pull in more people? You talked about members before. And personally, I feel people like Gandhi or Thoreau, it's not just civil disobedience, but there's a spiritual component to it. And it's where you capture people's minds and hearts. And there's a need for everybody to have a change in the outcome. We need salt. And in the meantime, we need to take down the political and economy that's here in the form of the, you know, the English, the British Empire and so on. So, have you found anything that would particularly unite free staters in some sort of civil disobedience? Not just street theater.
I would say, I mean, there's people
But
in
real
Keene that wouldn't even
service
associate with the Free Stater label, you know, so I would say to try to have an umbrella movement under something. I mean, if some individual or whatever group of individuals wants to try something, but
The best group civil disobedience that I've seen is the 420 celebrations, which when they were happening in Keene, they have happened in Concord, by the way, and there's going to be another one coming up in Concord on April 20th. So those have been very successful in Concord. We've seen a couple hundred people out in front of the State House consuming cannabis. The cops stay back. They don't do anything about it. And those events are minority Free Staters. So in Keene, it was probably 15, maybe 20% of the crowd that were Free Staters, so-called. And in Concord, it was, you know, maybe 10 to 20% there. That's one of those issues that brings a lot of people on board. But I'd love to hear any other suggestions that people have for something else that could unite different areas of the state.
Thank you. Any other questions? You already started.
Anyone who hasn't asked a question yet? Got a question? Okay, Max.
Yeah, I just had a quick comment. I noticed that the people in Manchester were very, very responsive to civil disobedience when we did it there. One of the things we did is we'd wait until like 11 o'clock when the park curfew came in, and right at 11 p.m. the cops would be driving by, and they finally got used to just driving past. We'd go do the litter pickups, you know, right after 11 o'clock when we're not supposed to be in the Veterans Park.
How many people did you have?
Like 15 or 20.
And when
Makes
was
a
this?
difference.
When was this?
I think it was like a year or two ago. But in general, I've noticed that people in Manchester tend to be pretty responsive to things like that.
just to answer your question, man, I mean, like, more and more people being negatively impacted by folks who think they have the right to control their actions as the size and scope of the state grows. And, you know, that only happens because people grant them authority. But, you know, when they're themselves harmed by this, then they're, you know, more likely to want to change it for something better. So I would say, like, if we look around, there's probably a lot of receptive people. And as for a particular issue, I mean, you know, I think it's important just to strike the root and come down to, like, self-ownership, because, like, the marijuana thing is great because you have the right to consume whatever if you don't harm anybody, but that, you know, means that you're not investing, like, it's a single issue to me. I mean, and the larger, it stems from a core issue of self-ownership, so why not just focus on the self-ownership aspect and, like, you know, say these, you know, just live free, and any regulation or constraint someone tries to put on you, you know, any third party that you don't consent to is illegitimate.
Yep, all these issues tied to that one issue.
Well, and when it comes to the marijuana, civil disobedience, we're out there making connections with the NHT Pop Party, which they brought out a whole lot of people to the State House event. And that's a completely different network. You know, I didn't know any of those people before I went to that event. But being there allowed me to connect with the lady that's behind the Facebook page, and that, you know, she knows all these other people, and now she follows Free Keene, or she had already seen Free Keene, but she, you know, certainly had more of a relationship now than ever before. And so, even though it's a single issue, it opens up those other folks to connect with the larger principle of and to have conversations with as many of us as possible. So, any other questions? Marcus.
Yeah, I'm afraid of people that are willing to use force against me to, you know, force me to do something, and whether they're wearing a badge or a mask. or nothing. And one of the things that the media that you guys have done that has helped me a lot is to expose the reality of, you know, being put in jail to some extent. I mean, I haven't been there, so I haven't experienced it myself. But I think you've, you know, humanized that and made it less scary. But at the same time, it still is scary that people are willing to not, you know, live peacefully and use aggression. And I was wondering if you could just speak a little bit about, you know, you guys facing your own fears in the face of people that are willing to use force against you.
Well, for me, it was, I was caged for 3 days because I had a camera the size of my thumb in a courthouse. And I had never been through a New Hampshire jail situation like that. So for me, I knew I was going to get arrested at some point, and I wanted to see what New Hampshire does to people, what New Hampshire does to peaceful people in many circumstances when they bring them through the process. So because of that, I wasn't really, it sounds weird to say, I wasn't really down on the experience. It was a learning experience for me, and I'm now able to relate to people a little bit better who have been had violence used against them by the state.
So you're talking about fear, and that's something that I think we all deal with at some level. And as long as you're afraid, then they know you're never really going to do anything that is of significance to change the situation. So approaching the non-cooperation, civil disobedience does require putting as much fear aside as you can. And so there are ways to mitigate some of that fear right up front. One, move to New Hampshire. I wouldn't want to do some of these things if I were in New Jersey. I'm from Florida originally, and those cops down there are much scarier than they are here in New Hampshire. So move to New Hampshire, get around other like-minded people, because when you've got that support network, it's a lot more, you know, the fear isn't as much of an issue when you know there are people that are out there for you, that are willing to come to a trial, they're willing to, you know, come to the jail, they're willing to write you letters while you're in jail. That helps. And you know, in addition to that, move to Cheshire County, because if you're going to do civil disobedience, Wes, who's sitting in Manchester jail, one of the things that he said in his letter to me was that it's way better in Cheshire County jail. So, you know, the circumstances that, you know, you choose in which to do the civil disobedience make a difference. You know, if you're in a jail that's run by a guy who is a member of law enforcement against prohibition, you're probably in a better jail than, say, Joe Arpaio in Maricopa County, Arizona. You know, do you want to be in Tent City, out in the desert, eating moldy bologna, or do you want to be in, you know, what is essentially the Club Med of jails with, you know, where the jail's spending $2 to $3 per meal as opposed to 40 cents in Arizona? So these are things that make the idea of going to jail and facing those consequences a little bit more tolerable. Obviously, there's still fear involved. You never know if you're going to encounter a road cop. You never know, but if, you know, if there are video cameras around, that helps, right? Helps them behave differently. What do you feel about fear?
Yeah, I mean, there's a quip, like, fear is a mind killer, and I think if we continue to be led by fear, the bad folks, the people who think it's okay to use violence against peaceful people, whether unthinkingly or they just think they're doing their job, is only going to continue and get worse. So if we're scared today and we don't do anything, it's going to be even more difficult tomorrow. So, you know, yes, it's uncomfortable going to jail, but, you know, it's, again, like, look at it as a period to reflect and do some creative destruction and chew on things and analyze stuff and think about new stuff. And, you know, it's there's mail to jail, which has helped lessen the isolation of being put in a cage. There's Prisoners for Liberty, which will soon be folded in with DefiantForYou.com. These are all resources to reach out to people presently caged that are like liberty activists. And I know, like it was expressed earlier, Wes, I mean, he thrives on getting letters from folks, and, you know, and it's easy to forget about people when they're in a cage, but so a letter can make a big difference. So if you haven't, I really suggest
please pay it forward. I mean, even whether you plan on doing civil disobedience someday, take some time, write to Wes, mailtojail.com. You know, maybe you'll be in jail someday and he'll write to you, and other people will write to you then.
But just personal, I mean, the other thing, being in the Shire, yes, there's the numbers, it helps. Like, you get out of jail somewhere else and you have one friend on the ground maybe, but you get out in Keene, and like in an hour, there's a couple different people out.
We're taking you out to lunch.
Strategizing, yeah, figuring out how to move forward. They're moving forward on all fronts. Like, we're personalizing the issue because, you know, if someone harasses you and you just give them money to make them go away, then it's only going to incentivize them to continue to do that. But if you speak out and you support each other, then that kind of stuff stops. And especially if you personalize it and you say, hey, my name's like, you know, Marcus, and I was put in a cage for this, and where was the victim? And people are like, wow, that doesn't make sense, and he seems like a decent guy. And then, I mean, it resonates with people. Like, I would say, like, truth and morality are on our side, objectivity. We're not the bad people. Our actions speak for themselves. So the more we can put that out there, the better.
I think ending on the fear topic's a good one to
Thanks, Marcus.
Thanks, Marcus.
No fear.
We got a song, by the way, don't we?
Speaking of fear, hopefully you guys aren't afraid to sing a little bit, because most of you have song sheets. If you don't, we have more that we can pass out. But so we're members of the Shire Choir, and our latest song is Thanks But No Tanks.
It's to the tune Three Dogs.
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeene.com. Freekeene.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. Freekeene.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. Freekeene.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.